My fiancé's dad touched me inappropriately, and she acted like it wasn't a big deal. Hey Reddit. My fiancé and I have been together for 3 years, and I truly thought she was the love of my life. We had the perfect relationship, or so I thought. She was supportive, kind, and always made me feel like I was her priority. I never had any reason to doubt her love for me. That's why I was so excited when she suggested we spend more time with her family before the wedding. She wanted me to bond with her parents, especially her dad, since he was the most important person in her life. I agreed, thinking it would just be a normal family gathering. I had no idea my life was about to take a turn I never could have imagined. Her parents lived about an hour away, so we planned to stay the weekend. The first night was fine, just dinner, some wine, and conversations about wedding plans. Her dad, Mark, was charming but a little too friendly. He kept complimenting me in ways that felt off, saying I was stunning and that my fiancée was lucky to have such a beautiful woman. At first, I brushed it off as an innocent compliment. But then he started making comments about my body. How I had a perfect figure. How he was surprised a girl like me wasn't already taken before his daughter found me. I forced a smile, trying not to make it awkward. My fiancé laughed and said, "Dad, stop, you're embarrassing her." But she didn't seem genuinely uncomfortable. Just amused. That should have been my first red flag. Later that night, I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner. My fiancé had gone upstairs to shower, and her mom had already gone to bed. It was just me and Mark. I could feel his eyes on me as I washed the dishes, but I tried to ignore it. Then, out of nowhere, I felt his hand on my lower back. I froze. He leaned in close, his breath hot against my neck, and said, "You really are something special. I see why my daughter loves you so much." His hand slid lower. That's when I snapped out of my shock and jerked away. "What the hell are you doing?" I hissed, my heart pounding. He just chuckled like it was a joke. "Relax, sweetheart. No need to get all worked up." I was shaking. I didn't know what to do. I felt violated, disgusted. I stormed out of the kitchen and ran upstairs to tell my fiancée. She was still in the bathroom, so I paced in the bedroom, trying to calm myself down. When she finally came out, I told her everything. I expected her to be furious, to run downstairs and confront him. Instead, she frowned and said, "Are you sure? Maybe you misinterpreted it." Misinterpreted it? My jaw dropped. "Are you serious right now?" He touched me. He was disgusting. She sighed, running a hand through her wet hair. "Look, my dad can be a little flirty, but he doesn't mean anything by it. He's just like that." My stomach twisted. "Just like that?" I repeated, "So he's done this before?" She hesitated, then shrugged. "I mean, he's just a touchy person. It doesn't mean anything." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "It means something to me." I felt violated. Instead of comforting me, she rolled her eyes. "Babe, I don't want to fight about this. It's not a big deal. Just ignore him. He probably had too much to drink." I couldn't even speak. I felt like I was losing my mind. How could she dismiss this? How could she act like it was nothing? I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt his disgusting hands on me. I wanted to leave, but I didn't have my own car, and we had planned to stay the whole weekend. I thought about calling an Uber, but I didn't want to make a scene. Maybe in the morning, my fiancé would realize how serious this was. But the next day, she acted completely normal. Like nothing had happened. Her dad even had the nerve to wink at me during breakfast. I felt sick. I couldn't eat. Every time he spoke to me, I wanted to crawl out of my skin. My fiancée noticed my silence and later pulled me aside. "Can you not be weird today?" she whispered. "I don't want any drama." I stared at her, realizing for the first time that maybe I didn't know her as well as I thought I did. I had always seen her as my safe place, the person I could turn to no matter what. But now, she was protecting him. She was choosing to ignore what he did to me because it was easier than facing the truth. That evening, things got even worse. My fiancée went out with her mom to pick up some things for dinner, leaving me alone in the house with Mark. I locked myself in the guest room, pretending to take a nap just so I wouldn't have to see him. But then I heard a knock on the door. I froze. "Hey, sweetheart," his voice came through the wood. "You okay in there?" I didn't answer. The door handle jiggled. "Come on now, don't be shy. Let's talk." Panic surged through me. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was frozen. Then, mercifully, I heard a car pull up outside. My fiancée and her mom were back. Mark quickly retreated, and I let out a breath I didn't even realize I was holding. When my fiancée came upstairs, I told her what happened. I was done being calm. I told her I wanted to leave. "Now." She groaned. "Babe, he was probably just checking on you. You're being dramatic." That was it. That was the moment something inside me broke. I realized she was never going to take my side. She was never going to protect me. And I couldn't be with someone who let me feel unsafe. I told her I was leaving, with or without her. She got angry, saying I was overreacting, that I was trying to ruin her relationship with her dad. But I didn't care anymore. I packed my bag, called an Uber, and left. Now, I'm sitting in my apartment, staring at my phone. She's been calling and texting nonstop, begging me to come back and talk things out. But I don't know if I can. How do you marry someone who doesn't care that their father violated you? How do you spend your life with someone who tells you to just ignore it? I don't know what to do. I love her, but I feel betrayed in a way I never have before. Am I overreacting? Or is this the moment I realize she's not the person I thought she was? I need to decide soon, but I don't know what choice to make. And the worst part? I have a feeling this isn't over yet. I spent the next few days in a state of complete emotional turmoil. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart would race, expecting another message from my fiancé. She had sent dozens of texts, ranging from apologies to frustration to outright blaming me for blowing things out of proportion. I couldn't wrap my head around it. How could someone I loved, someone I planned to spend my life with, be so indifferent to what had happened to me? At first, I ignored her calls. I needed space. I needed time to think. But eventually, I caved. I answered. Her voice was soft, almost pleading. She said she missed me, that she didn't want to lose me over a misunderstanding. I felt my stomach twist at that word. Misunderstanding. That's what she called it. I told her straight up that I didn't feel safe around her father and that her reaction had shattered my trust in her. She sighed heavily, like she was the one dealing with something exhausting. She said she understood that I was upset, but that leaving was unnecessary. She kept saying things like, "You didn't mean it that way and you're making this bigger than it is." The more she talked, the angrier I felt. I asked her, point blank, if she would be okay if the roles were reversed. If my dad had touched her like that. If my dad had cornered her in a room. There was a long pause. Then she mumbled something about, "Well, I'd probably just talk to you about it first." That was it for me. She didn't get it. Or worse, she didn't care to get it. I told her I needed more time and hung up. I didn't know if I could forgive her for this. I didn't know if our relationship could survive it. A few days passed, and I started to feel like maybe I had dodged a bullet. Maybe this was the universe's way of showing me that she wasn't the person I was supposed to marry. I started thinking about how to move forward, how to rebuild my life without her in it. But then something happened that completely threw me off. I got a message from an unknown number. It was her dad. "Hey sweetheart, I hope you're doing okay. I think we got off on the wrong foot last time. Would love to talk and clear things up. No hard feelings, right?" My skin crawled. I felt sick. How did he even get my number? I immediately blocked him, but the damage was already done. I felt like I was being watched, like he was somehow still in my space even though I had left that house days ago. I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Then, as if things couldn't get worse, my fiancé called again. I didn't answer, but she left a voicemail. Her tone was annoyed this time, not apologetic. She said she had talked to her dad and that he felt bad about what happened. That he didn't mean to make me uncomfortable and was just trying to be nice. That he wanted to meet up and clear the air. I stared at my phone, my hands shaking with rage. He felt bad? He wanted to clear the air? Like this was some minor misunderstanding that could be brushed under the rug? I was done. I texted her one last time, telling her that I wasn't coming back. That I couldn't marry someone who defended a man like that. That she had made her choice, and it wasn't me. She responded almost instantly, her messages flooding in. She said I was overreacting, that I was throwing away everything we had over one mistake. That her dad was willing to apologize, so why wasn't I willing to listen? I blocked her. I sat on my couch, my mind spinning. It was over. 3 years of my life, just gone. Not because of what her dad did, but because of how she handled it. Because of how little she cared about what I went through. But as I sat there, trying to process everything, a thought crept into my mind. Something told me this wasn't over. Something told me her dad wasn't going to let this go so easily. And worse, something told me neither was she. After blocking both of them, I thought I could finally breathe. I thought that was the end of it. But deep down, a part of me knew it wasn't going to be that easy. Something told me that my ex-fiancée and her father weren't the type to just let things go. At first, there was silence. A full day passed with no messages, no calls. I felt a mix of relief and paranoia. Was it really over? Or were they just waiting for the right moment? Then, on the second day, I got an email. It was from her. The subject line just said, "Please." I hesitated before opening it, my stomach twisting. She wrote a long, rambling message about how she couldn't believe I was throwing everything away over a misunderstanding. How her dad was devastated that I thought of him as some kind of predator. How I had blown things way out of proportion and that I was being cruel by ignoring her attempts to talk. She ended it with a line that sent a chill down my spine. I know you're angry, but you can't just cut me out of your life like this. I love you, and I won't stop fighting for us. Fighting for us. It didn't sound romantic. It sounded like a threat. I didn't respond. I deleted the email and tried to push it out of my mind. But my anxiety was through the roof. I started double-checking that my doors were locked. I avoided going outside unless necessary. A part of me felt like I was overreacting, but another part of me felt like I needed to be prepared for something worse. And I was right. That night, around 10 p.m., there was a knock at my door. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest. I wasn't expecting anyone. I crept toward the door, my breath shaky, and looked through the peephole. It was her. She was standing outside my apartment, her arms wrapped around herself like she was cold. Her face was streaked with tears. I know you're in there, she called out, her voice trembling. Please, just talk to me. I backed away from the door, my mind racing. She had actually come to my apartment. I didn't know what to do. If I opened the door, I knew she'd try to manipulate me. But if I ignored her, would she leave? She knocked again, harder this time. Please, I just want to talk. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I stood there, silent. I didn't trust her. Then her voice changed. It was lower now. I know you think I don't care. But you don't understand. I had to defend him. I didn't have a choice. I frowned. What did that mean? Before I could decide whether to answer, something else happened that made my blood run cold. Another knock. But this one wasn't at my door. It was at my window. I spun around, and through the blinds, I saw a shadowy figure standing outside. My apartment was on the ground floor, and someone was right there, peering in. My stomach dropped. I didn't need to see his face to know who it was. Her dad. I stumbled backward, my heart slamming against my ribs. Come on now, his voice came through the glass, calm and steady. Let's be adults about this. Panic surged through me. This wasn't just some desperate attempt to talk. They had planned this. She had come to the front while he crept around the side. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 with shaking hands. I need the police, I whispered, my voice barely audible. My ex-fiancé and her father are at my apartment. They won't leave. As soon as the dispatcher answered, I saw movement outside. They must have realized what I was doing because her dad suddenly stepped away from the window, and she banged on the door one last time before yelling, "You don't have to do this. We could have fixed this." Then they were gone. I stood there, my entire body shaking, waiting for the police to arrive. By the time they showed up, my ex and her father were nowhere to be seen. I explained everything, how I had blocked them, how they showed up at my home uninvited, how her dad had been at my window watching me. The officers took it seriously. They advised me to get a restraining order and said they'd do extra patrols around my neighborhood. But as they left, one of them gave me a look that made me uneasy. "People like that?" he said. "They don't just walk away." I barely slept that night. My mind kept replaying everything that had happened. The way she begged. The way he stood at my window like he had all the time in the world. The way they both acted like they were entitled to my time, my attention, my life. This wasn't over. I had a sinking feeling that things were about to get even worse. I barely slept that night. Every noise, every shadow outside my window made my skin crawl. The police had taken my report, but what could they really do? They hadn't caught them in the act, and until they did something worse, it felt like I was just supposed to sit here and wait for them to make their next move. The next morning, I made the decision to file a restraining order. I wasn't going to live in fear, waiting for them to show up again. I gathered every piece of evidence I had, the messages, the emails, even the police report from the night before, and took it to the courthouse. The process wasn't easy, and even as I filled out the paperwork, a part of me wondered if this would even stop them. A few days passed. Silence. No calls, no messages, no unexpected visits. It was almost worse than the harassment. The quiet felt unnatural, like the calm before a storm. I kept my doors locked at all times, avoided going out unless necessary, and jumped at the sound of my phone buzzing. Then, on the fourth night, I woke up to a sound that sent ice through my veins. Scraping. Outside my bedroom window. I sat up, my breath caught in my throat. The blinds were shut, but I could see a faint shadow shifting outside. I reached for my phone, my hands shaking. I knew who it was. I barely managed to dial 911 before I heard a voice, low, almost taunting. "Come on, sweetheart. We both know this has gone too far." My blood ran cold. It was him. Mark. Her father. I backed away from the window as the dispatcher answered. My voice was a whisper, but I forced the words out. "Someone is trying to break into my apartment." The dispatcher stayed on the line, but I could barely focus on what she was saying. The scraping sound turned into something worse. The doorknob rattled. I couldn't breathe. He wasn't just lurking this time. He was trying to get in. You don't have to be scared, darling. Just open the door. Let's talk. My heart slammed against my ribs. I ran to my closet, grabbing the baseball bat I kept for emergencies. If he got inside, I wasn't going down without a fight. Then, sirens. Red and blue lights flashed through the cracks of my blinds, and the rattling at the door stopped. I heard footsteps running. Then shouting. I stayed frozen in place until I heard the loud knock at the door. Police. Open up. I rushed over and unlocked it, nearly collapsing when I saw the officers standing there. One of them was already in pursuit of Mark, while another stayed with me. They found him a block away. Drunk. Angry. Trying to claim that I was his daughter's crazy ex who was ruining his life. It didn't matter. He was arrested on the spot. But the nightmare wasn't over. The next day, my ex called me from a different number. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the best of me. The moment I answered, she was sobbing. Not apologizing, sobbing. You put my dad in jail, you ruined my family. How could you? I almost laughed at the insanity of it. He tried to break into my home. What the hell did you expect me to do? She sniffled, her breathing uneven. You could have just talked to me. We could have figured this out. But you had to make it legal. You had to turn this into a war. A war? Was she serious? I hung up. That was the last time I ever spoke to her. The restraining order was finalized. Her dad was charged with trespassing and attempted breaking and entering. He took a plea deal, which meant he wouldn't serve much time, but it didn't matter. I had legal protection now. He couldn't come near me. She, on the other hand, disappeared from my life. Blocked on everything. Gone. It took weeks before I finally started feeling safe again. Before I stopped looking over my shoulder every time I left my apartment. Before I stopped waking up in the middle of the night expecting to hear his voice outside my window. But eventually, the fear faded. I started to heal. And I realized something. I had been so in love with my fiancé that I ignored the warning signs. The little things that didn't add up. The way she brushed things off. The way she defended him. I thought I knew her, but in reality, I never did. I almost married into a family that would have destroyed me. Now, I finally have my freedom. And I will never let anyone take that away from me again. That's all for today's video, folks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us next time for more exciting content. See you next time.